midpoint. We're going to explore three things in this video. First, the definition of the term midpoint. Second, we're going to look at two different formulas. The first formula will be for finding the coordinate of the midpoint of a line segment with endpoints on the number line. And the second formula we're going to look at is the formula for finding the coordinates of the midpoint of a line segment with endpoints on the coordinate plane. Okay, so let's look at the definition first. The midpoint x of segment AB is the point between, meaning collinear, A and B such that AX equals XB and segment AX is congruent to segment XB. Let's just review this notation here quickly. AX, when written without the line segment over the top, means the distance between the 2 points, which is a number, and that is equal to the distance between these 2 points, which is a number. Okay? So the midpoint separates the segments into equal segments. Over here, we're saying that the midpoint separates the segments into congruent segments. Alrighty, so let's take a look. Here's our number line. What we're going to do is try to think about the midpoint intuitively, and then we're going to figure out the formula. Alright, so let's say I just throw 2 points up here at 1, and let's say at 5. Doesn't take very long for everyone to see the middle or the midpoint of a segment whose endpoints are 1 and 5. I think we can all see that it's 3. Notice this length here is 2, this length here is 2, 2 equals 2, so we've satisfied that. And these two segments are congruent, same shape and size. All right, now what if I move this? Let's make it -5 and 7. Now, it's not quite so easy to just kind of visually and see the midpoint, but I think intuitively we can figure this out. I'm just going to give you a second here. A couple of you might have just counted spaces and then taken half of it and then counted that distance from one of the two endpoints. Another method for doing that is to see that -5 to 0, to see that -5 to 0 is 5 units and 0 to 7 is 7 units. So the whole distance here, 5 to 7, is 12 units. Therefore, our midpoint must be 6 units from either endpoint, making our midpoint 1. But what happens now if instead of -5 and 7, instead of integers, I'm at -6.3 and, I don't know, 3.6. Finding the midpoint intuitively like we've been doing is not quite so easy. So let's take a look at another method. What if instead of our number line just being any old number line, let's think of this number line as part of a number line and it represents quiz grades. So one quiz grade might have been, sorry, I just have to send this to back. There we go. One quiz grade might have been a 76, and another quiz grade, I don't know, 65. And you want to know what's the average of your two quiz grades. Well, how are you going to find the average of quiz grades, whether it's on the number line or not? Let's take a look. My quiz grades are 65 and 76. So my quiz grades here are 65 and 76. What's my average quiz grade? Well, to find the average of the two quiz grades, the middle of the two quiz grades, the mean of the two quiz grades, we add 65 plus 76 and divide by 2 because there's 2 quizzes. Okay, so when I add my 65, it's 141 divided by 2. And so my average quiz grade is 70.5. So the midpoint of a line segment can be thought of as the average of the coordinates of the endpoints of the segment. There we go. I have a line segment. The points are named A and B. The coordinate, the number value, the coordinate here is x sub 1 and x sub 2. So these are the names A and B, and this is the value, the number value of those points. And so the midpoint M is given by the formula x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. The average, the mean, same formula. So here's your complete formula. If segment AB has endpoints at x sub 1 and x sub 2 on the number line, then the midpoint M of line segment AB has coordinates x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. Let's look at an example. Here. I have a line segment, and let's say here's A, here's B, here's my line segment AB, and this is negative 2.3, and this value is 4.1. What are the coordinates of M, the midpoint of that segment? Well, using our formula, we know that the midpoint equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. And that is our midpoint formula for finding the coordinate of a midpoint on the number line. There it is. So we write down our formula, we substitute negative 2.3 plus 4.1 divided by 2. That's 1.8 divided by 2. And our answer is 0.9. And that is the value of our midpoint M. All right, now I'd like to extend what we've been doing to the coordinate plane. And here I'm just going to go ahead and show you a segment on the coordinate plane. And we are going to come up with the general formula for finding the coordinates of the midpoint. All right, so we have point P and point Q. And point P has values x sub 1, y sub 1, and Q x sub 2, y sub 2. Now, on the coordinate plane, it's just a horizontal number line and a vertical number line. So all we need to do on the coordinate plane is to look at just the x's. So how would I find the middle of the x's? If I only looked at x sub 1 and x sub 2, how would I find the middle of the x's? I would simply use my midpoint formula and find the middle of the x's as x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. And that would give me this middle point here. Once I find the middle of the x's, all I have to do now is find the middle of the y's. Once I found this midpoint and the y midpoint, I magically put them together, separating them by a comma, and I have found that point on the coordinate plane that both has horizontal and vertical movement. All right, so if these are my x's, how am I going to find the middle of the y's? The same thing. I'm going to take my y values, add them, divide it by 2. Therefore, the midpoint on the coordinate plane is simply x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2, comma, y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. And that's my midpoint. Here we go. If PQ has endpoints at P, x sub 1, y sub 1, and Q, x sub 2, y sub 2 in the coordinate plane, then the midpoint M of line segment PQ has the following coordinates. All right, let's look at one example. we go. I have a line segment whose endpoints are -8, 1, and the other one is 10, 6. To find the midpoint, I can simply look at my x middle, and I'm going to call this x sub m. The middle of my x's is simply going to be -8 plus 10 divided by 2, which is 2 divided by 2, which is 1. That is my x middle. My x sub m equals my x sub 1 plus my x sub 2 over 2. Okay? Now I'm going to find my y middles. 1 plus 6 divided by 2, which is 7 divided by 2, which we can leave it as 7 divided by 2, 3.5. So the answer to my question, the midpoint of a segment whose endpoints are stated here is 1, 3.5. I add the coordinates of my x's, divide by 2. I add the coordinates of my y, divide by 2. And then that becomes my midpoint. And there's a few problems in the textbook. Page 30, problems 7, 8, 9, 10. Give it a try, and we will go over this tomorrow in class.